Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jay from Sony Alpha Lab, and what I got here is the Sony A7 Mark III and the RX100 Mark VI. So clearly these cameras are way different, but I wanted to do a comparison video because they're both pro-grade cameras. And this one here, the RX100, is so convenient that it's so small that you can basically put it in your pocket and carry it everywhere with very little burden. You know what I mean? You can have this camera on you at all times, and it's really not going to weigh you down, really not going to be inconvenient because it fits in your pocket. And this is with the kit lens, okay? So I just wanted to give you an idea of the size difference, okay? So now just imagine carrying this camera around all the time with you to take photos. You may not mind that, but if you're somebody like me that has kids and you're out and about and you don't want to hold the camera the entire time, but you would prefer obviously to have the full frame camera, but it's just not convenient and not practical in a lot of cases. That's what this video is going to be about. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. I'm going to show you all comparison photos of what both cameras can do in the same situation. And I think you'll be quite surprised at the image quality results when comparing the two cameras. And convenience-wise, I mean, this is just insane. It's a turnkey solution. It has a built-in flash, has a 24 to 200 equivalent lens, and it's just got an insane amount of features. It has a viewfinder built in. The screen fully articulates. I mean, this is a super, super powerful pro-grade camera. Even though it's super tiny, that doesn't mean it doesn't have the power, of a pro-grade camera, and it really does. Now, the Sony A7 III offers a lot more, but out of the box as a kit, it doesn't really offer as much as this camera. Like, there's no flash here. You're going to have to buy a flash. It comes with the kit lens. Now, obviously you can get different lenses, but with this kit, you basically only get 28 to 70 millimeter. All right. Now this one you get 24, which is wider on the wide end, and it goes all the way to 200 on the telephoto end. All right. So again, versatility wise, the A7 III is going to beat the RX100 as far as potential goes, but out of the box, the RX100 actually beats the A7 III kit. Like I said, because of the built-in flash and the better lens, more range, things like that. Now, of course, this camera, you can change lenses. And what's so cool about that is you can put almost any lens on. I got my A7R here, and I have an old school Minolta 50 millimeter lens from like the 80s. Now, you can just get these cheap adapters and mount that right on this camera, like so. So now I'm using a non-autofocus, completely passive, old school lens, and it's a 50 millimeter 1.4, and you can just do that with a camera like this. Now you can also take that off. You can also get a Metabones adapter, and you can put lenses like this on, the Canon, 70 to 200 millimeter, and you can have that as an option. So clearly this is more versatile, potentially, but at the cost, of $1,000 more. This camera here goes for $21.98, and this camera here goes for $11.98. So, the price difference is pretty significant. All right, so I just wanted to go over that really quick. So obviously, like I said, the versatility of the A7 III potentially is way more, but at the cost of buying a bunch of extra stuff. The RX100 VI is a turnkey solution. It's got everything you need to take photos. It's got the flash, all that type of stuff. So you don't have to worry about any of those other problems. Now, features-wise, the RX100 is packing a ton of features. It has this high frame rate mode, so it can do super slow motion up to 960 frames per second. The A7 III can only do a 120 frames per second, which is still pretty good. You can still get some slow-mo out of it, but not as much. You know what I mean? All right, so weight-wise, this camera kit weighs in at almost 2 pounds, and the RX100 VI weighs only about, 10.6 ounces. So a huge difference in weight. And then the sensor size, the sensor inside here is 1 inch versus a 35 millimeter full frame sensor. So that's a huge difference. The sensor is gigantic in this camera and, pretty big in this camera for a super small compact. It's a large sensor compact. So it's not exactly a small sensor, but compared to the full frame, it is small. So in low light, the RX100 is not going to be near as good as the A7 III. That's really the biggest negative to the smaller sensor, other than the depth of field differences. So the ISO maxes out at 12,800 on the RX100, and it goes all the way up to 204,800 on the A7. So you could see the difference. I'm going to show you in Lightroom the comparison photos, and you will see how significant that difference is. But again, in the real world, ISO 12,800 is really high, and in a lot of situations, you know, it's really not that big of a deal. I mean, the quality is still excellent on this camera, even in low light, especially when compared to a cell phone. I mean, most people are looking for better than cell phone shots, and this camera is so much better than a cell phone, it's not even comparable in any way, really. Although cell phones look pretty good, the pictures these days, but when you compare it to a real camera like this, and especially an actual, you know, full frame camera, it's obviously laughable. But, you know, that's basically what this is for. So a lot of professionals actually pick up the RX100 series camera as their walk-around camera because they don't want to carry this thing. They don't want to lug this around when they're going out to dinner with their family, for example, or, you know, going for a hike. But they do want to have the opportunity to take pictures, and they want the quality to be awesome. So they pick up an RX100 and they use that for their walk-around camera because that's how good it is. It really is that good. This is a pro-grade camera, guys. I know you might not think it just because of the size, but it really is. So when it comes down to performance, both of these cameras are extremely capable. This camera here, the RX100 can do 24 frames per second. That's incredible. So if you're taking a picture of like a batter swinging or a pitcher pitching, things like that, you can capture 24 frames per second, and the quality is phenomenal. The focus is really fast on this camera, although not as fast as the A7 III. The A7 III has a way better focus system, but that being said, the RX100 also has a very good focus system. So it is a little bit slower on the telephoto end. When you're at an effective 200 millimeter, the focus does slow down a bit, but it's still pretty snappy, and it's still capable of tracking subjects and auto exposing at that 24 frames per second. So it's extremely capable. The A7 III can do 10 frames per second while also obviously autofocusing and auto exposing, which is pretty incredible in itself. It's not as good as this as far as frame rate goes, but 10 frames per second is pretty good for almost anything. But 24 frames per second, now again, a swinging bat and with a ball coming in, you're more likely to catch the shot with a camera like this at 24 frames per second. There's just no doubt about it. Now, ergonomics wise, you can see here, you kind of have to pinch the camera. And then what I do is I put my pinky on the bottom to help support it. You know, and you could also, of course, use another hand to make it nice and steady when you're taking photos. But basically, if you're one-handing it, it's going to be like this, all right? And the pinch it's just a little bit awkward. I mean, my hands are pretty big. And when you got to take a picture, you kind of have to move your fingers like this. And I put my thumb on the bottom, and then I do it like this. And you can turn the ring like so, all right? Not too bad. Now, the A7 III has this big grip here, so you can really get a hold of it. You know, it's obviously heavier, and then it has this thumb rest here, right there. So you can put your thumb there, and you got your fingers there. And I also still put a finger on the bottom to help support the weight. And then, of course, you have one hand on the lens when you're actually shooting. So you're holding it like this. It's very firm in the hands, and you feel very confident holding this camera. The RX100, I don't feel as confident holding it. Like it's not terrible to hold, don't get me wrong, but I feel like I have to have the strap on because, I don't know, it just seems like it might slip out of my hand, or if somebody bumps me or something, like I might drop it. So I just feel that little bit nervous when I'm holding this camera as far as the ergonomics go. And you can see the screen articulates all the way down like that on this camera. And then it also goes all the way up, so you can use it as a selfie camera. All right, so this is a great vlogging camera. If you're a vlogger, this is one of the best options you can get. Huge sensor, screen flips up, the audio quality is really good when recording just off the camera. All right, so keep that in mind. And then the A7 III, the screen goes up to here, like so. It only goes that high, and when you aim it down, it only goes to there. So not quite the same articulation on the screen. I really wish Sony would increase the articulation so it would fully come up, but they just don't seem to want to do that. Both cameras have touch screens, so you can do touch for focus. This one, default touch to focus is on. On the A7 III, you actually have to turn it on. It's not on by default. All right, so image quality. We're going to go into Lightroom now, and I'm going to show you just how amazing both these cameras are image quality wise. And I think you're going to be quite surprised at how capable the RX100 is when comparing like A to B photos. All right, so let's move on to Lightroom, and I will catch up with you guys in a minute. Alright, so here we are in Lightroom, and I just wanted to go over these photos really quick. And you can see here, this is the A7 III, and it's at approximately 50 millimeter. If you zoom in, you can see the sharpness is quite good, even using the kit lens. However, the corner sharpness, it starts to fall off right around here because it's a cheaper kit lens. Now, if we look at the Zeiss lens, which is affixed to the RX100 6, you can see the sharpness is significantly better, and also all the way to the corner, sharp all the way to the corner. So you're getting a better optic on the turnkey, ultra convenient RX100 6 solution. Now, here at 70 millimeter, I just wanted to show you, the maximum zoom with each kit. And 70 millimeter here, you can see the separation. The bokeh balls, look pretty cool. And the coin in the front here is out of focus. But again, the sharpness is pretty good overall. And if we go to the RX100 6, this is at an effective 200 millimeter, so you can see obviously way more zoom on the RX100 out of the box, So here's a couple of shots here. I took this with the RX100. It's just Jace on the deck, and you can see the background and the foreground. The detail is very good. It's sharp. The background's a little bit out of focus, but nothing crazy. And here's another one, just more of a close-up, zoomed in a little more. And you can see the background blur looks pretty good. But then when you compare it to the full frame, you just have that more dreamy look. It just looks more 3D. The out of focus is smoother and just butterier. It's just more pleasing to the eye, in my opinion, the out of focus area. And here's more of a closer shot. And again, you can see the background. It just looks a little bit better. That larger sensor does make a difference in this area in particular. All right, so let's moving on here. Just a deck shot here, just a railing fall off, and you can see, what it looks like. It looks okay, pretty good. And then on the full frame image, you could see it's just more out of focus in the foreground and in the background, giving a little bit more of a 3D / dreamy look. All right. Now here's just a Razor scooter on the deck. I focused on the bolt right here to show you just the depth of field fall off pretty much, and overall sharpness that you're going to get with these two kits. So here's the RX100. And this is the full frame Sony A7 III. And you can just see how buttery the background is and how much the depth of field falls off super quick. On this one, the depth of field falls off, but not near as much. And this is just one look focused on the front of the scooter. Right around here I focused. So there's the RX100, and here is the A7 III. You can see the back wheel just completely butters out. On the RX100, it blurs out a little bit, but not near as much as the full frame, Again, big sensor. So here's just a Toyota truck, a friend of mine at work, and this was shot with the RX100. And you can see the background sharpness. It's really sharp, like the detail on this roof and everything like that. It's sharp from front to back. Same thing with even the tree leaves. And this was at f2.8 on the RX100, so that's as wide as the aperture goes. Now here at f3.5 on the A7 III, you could see the background is soft because of the depth of field difference. You can see the trees, the bokeh, and all that. Alright, so here's another image, and here's the RX100 version, and here's the Sony A7 III version. And you can see they look very similar in the color and stuff like that. This exposure is just slightly brighter, but other than that, they're very similar overall. Just the background over here is just going to be a little bit softer on the A7 III due to the depth of field differences. And let's see here. Let me just move these over so they're next to one another. Alright, so here is another image with the RX100, and it's just a landscape scene. And you can see the sharpness is really good when you zoom in. It's sharp pretty much from the front all the way to the back for the most part, and I was shooting at f5.6. Now when you look at the A7 III, you can see the foreground is really out of focus here on the left and the right, and if I zoom all the way in, you can see the background is also out of focus because the focus where I focused was right here in this area. This is where I focused. So the depth of field at f5.6 is so much less that the sharpness is just not going to carry through the full scene. But it also makes it a little bit cooler looking in a lot of respects. Now here is another one with the RX100, and you can see just, the background separation is pretty good. Foreground separation is decent here. And if you zoom in, you can just see the incredible sharpness on this piece of rusted steel. And now here's the same, pretty much the same image, slightly different angle, but... Alright, so basically the same exact shot with the A7 III, slightly different angle, but you could see the background is totally out of focus, and the foreground is also very blurry, looks pretty cool. If I zoom in, You can see you also have that same excellent sharpness, but not the same depth of field. So the sharpness area is not the whole piece of steel. It's more just this area right here due to the plane of focus. So it's worth noting with the full frame, you're going to have to drop that aperture down to like an f8, f11 to make sure that everything is sharp in the scene that you're, depending on how close you are to your subject, etc. Now here's another image. This was taken with the RX100 6, and you can see it looks great, for all intensive purposes. Nothing wrong with it. It looks like a good shot. And here's the image with the A7 III. You can see it basically looks exactly the same, just slightly different depth of field fall off here towards the top. But other than that, they're pretty much the same. And now low light, here's a pretty big difference between the two images. So when you're looking at it full size, this is the A7 III, and let me just zoom in and show you the detail on this area here where the oscilloscope is. And you can see the detail is incredible. It's excellent, and it's really just excellent in the high ISO area, especially at 12,800. Now if you look at the RX100 6, this is at its max ISO, and you can see it's much more muddy. The detail's not near as good. So that's pretty much what you get when you compare low light, A to B like that between a full frame and a 1-inch. As good as the 1-inch is, it doesn't hold a candle to the full frame in that regard. All right, let's wrap this up. At the end of the day, the RX100 is just a super powerful camera that's extremely convenient to carry around. And it's extremely versatile as well with the lens options, the range 24 to 200, high frame rate, super slow motion features, built-in flash. It's got the viewfinder. It's got a fully articulating screen. I mean, this is an extremely capable camera that's $1,000 less than the A7 III. And this video is really for those people that are in the market. They're looking to upgrade. They're looking at all the different cameras. And if you're doing research like that, chances are you're going to stumble upon the A7 III because it is the best full frame camera for the money right now, in my opinion. So you're going to end up looking at this camera and you're going to be like, man, that camera's awesome. Which lens should I get? Things like that. Let me just go with the kit and see how that goes. Eventually, maybe I'll get more lenses. Well, if you're coming from a cell phone or even just a crappy camera, you really want to consider something like this because there's no burden carrying this around. You can carry it everywhere. You will get killer photos with this camera. Of course, you're going to get killer photos with the A7. It goes without saying. But this little camera, you might not expect to get such killer photos. That's why when you saw the sample photos, you can see. I mean, with some of the photos, you almost can't tell the difference. And some of them, obviously, you can with depth of field and low light, things like that. But, overall, both of these cameras are amazing. They're professional quality. And the build on both of them is great. But, turnkey versatility and power, the RX100 has a lot of advantages over the A7 III. And of course, the A7 III has incredible versatility if you want to buy lenses and flashes and all sorts of things like that. Full frame sensor is amazing. It has the built-in stabilization on the sensor, so the sensor actually is stabilized as well as a lot of the lenses. So this is obviously a better, more capable camera at the end of the day in a lot of ways, but you're going to have to pay for a lot of the features, like better lenses, to get different range, things like that. So ideally, it would be great to have both cameras. You have the full frame for when you're looking for that real high quality pro depth of field type photos and things like that. You want the absolute best quality possible. And then take this camera out when you're on the road or when you're hiking or when you're going out to dinner with the family and things like that. It would be nice to have both, but most people, it depends on your budget, obviously. So if you're in the market, this is $1,000 cheaper than this camera. So it's $21.98 versus $11.98. And, they're both expensive. Don't get me wrong. $11.98 is not cheap. $1,200 for a camera. Food for thought is really what this video is about. I'm trying to make, open up your mind into different options. And I could see a lot of people not even considering this camera, being like, I don't want that tiny camera. I want a real camera. If you are interested in this 1-inch sensor, don't forget to check out the RX10 Mark IV, which I recently reviewed. That has the same exact sensor as this, except it has a ridiculous 24 to 600 millimeter lens on it, and it has a body similar to the A7 III where there's a nice big grip on it, and it has a lot of physical buttons. So it's more like a DSLR than it is a super ultra compact, but it has that same high quality sensor and a lot of the same features as the RX100 series. So they're pretty much identical as far as features and stuff like that go, but the camera bodies themselves are just much different. So, but anyways, that is about it for this video, guys. I really hope you got what you were looking for. I would love to hear your thoughts below in the comments area. And, you know, if you want to see any other tests in particular, just let me know. I still have these cameras on hand for another few weeks. And, you know, I'll be happy to help you out, whatever the case may be. So please give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. I'd really appreciate that. And be sure to subscribe. All right, catch up with you later.